Right, hey guys, how we doing? Back with another video from Hamon Beat! And today we're going to be checking out how Jotaro can stop time. So why can Jotaro stop time? Not something I've ever really thought about. I just took it in with the series, because obviously Dio had the ability, and then it was just really cool to see Jotaro using Star Platinum doing the same. But I've never really, asked the question, so the question has been asked. Let's see the answer to it. Hamon Beat! And it's interesting as well because it's not like a 10-minute video, so there's a bit of an explanation here.
If somebody asks you to pick the single most iconic moment in the JoJo series, a good chunk of people would likely choose the final battle between Jotaro and Dio, and the shocking twist that, much like Dio, Jotaro is able to stop time. While obviously memorable for being such a surprising moment and making a great end to the fight, this scene has long been the topic of debate among JoJo fans, with many confused about how it was possible for Jotaro to have this ability, with others saying that there was no explanation for this and pointing to it as one of the series' biggest plot holes.
Okay.
However, despite what the discourse would have you believe, this moment has a solid explanation within the story.
Nice.
On top of that, I also believe it has some great thematic significance as well. So in this video, I'd just like to analyze everything there is to know about Jotaro's time stop, while explaining how it came to be and refuting many of the common misconceptions about it.
Nice.
First, let's go over exactly what led up to Jotaro's time stop in the manga. Maybe the most important clue to this mystery comes before Jotaro and Dio ever actually fight. During the car chase through the streets of Cairo, Kakyoin is the first member of the group to catch a glimpse of the world. After being wounded, Kakyoin comments that the world is a close-range power-type stand, similar to Jotaro's Star Platinum. Skipping ahead a bit, the battle between Jotaro and Dio begins shortly after Kakyoin's death, when Joseph warns Jotaro about Dio's ability before being incapacitated. After their initial clash, Dio is shocked to see Jotaro's hand making small movements.
He starts moving, doesn't he?
Yeah. Stop time. Here, the manga again calls attention to the two having the same type of stand.
So here we go.
Dio proceeds with caution, later discovering a magnet that had been planted on him, seemingly to trick Dio into thinking Jotaro could move. However, this was itself a trick, and Jotaro displays that he can in fact move for about a second and stop time.
Wow.
We're shown another important detail through a flashback to Dio's early use of his ability. Enya tells him that in order to stop time, you have to truly believe you can do it until it becomes a natural act. Moving forward again, we come to the final moments of the fight. Dio has stolen Joseph's blood, improving his body and increasing his time stop from 5 seconds to 9 seconds.
Crazy time.
In a final attack, Dio drops a steamroller
Let's go.
Jotaro in stop time, making it impossible for him to escape with his 1 second of movement. However, after his time stop comes to an end, Dio finds himself frozen, with Jotaro having stopped time. Now, for as iconic of a moment that is, the story doesn't really dwell on it afterwards. Jotaro and Dio move.
Yeah, it's like something just happens. It's like, whoa, that's cool, but like, make sense of it. Let's go.
To their final clash, and Jotaro doesn't have a moment where he directly explains how he did this. This is what leads to a lot of confusion among fans, since very often in JoJo we'll see a character do something shocking, immediately followed by an often convoluted explanation. Not to say that's a negative, since I think that's part of JoJo's charm.
Yeah.
In this case, though, it is understandable to expect some kind of direct explanation of how Jotaro did it. What many people miss, however, is that rather than being explained after, we actually already got all our clues before the moment happened. Simply put, Jotaro was able to stop time because Star Platinum is the same type of stand as the world.
Yeah.
This was established when the world first appeared, after all, and was repeated when Jotaro first moved within stop time. With the fight already establishing Jotaro being able to move within the stop time, Jotaro progressing from that to stopping time himself is obviously the natural outcome. This answer doesn't sit well with a lot of people.
Yeah, because, like, you, as the user in the stand, tend to share the same things. Like, if your stand takes damage, you take damage. Like, yeah.
People, though, with some questioning why a stand being similar means it has the same ability, when of course other short-range power-type stands exist but aren't also able to stop time. Others find it unbelievable that even with them being the same type of stand, that such a coincidence as them having the same ability could happen in the first place. I've noticed a fundamental misunderstanding people have with the same type of stand debacle, and that comes down to not actually understanding what is significant about their stands being similar. Beyond simply being two powerful short-range stands, Star Platinum and the world are essentially the same stand, and there is a very clear reason for this. Jotaro and Dio's stands were awakened following Dio's use of the stand arrow before the beginning of Part 3.
Yep.
Since Dio possessed Jonathan's body, the awakening of his stand caused the same to happen in Jonathan's descendants. The reason this happens is due to a phenomenon that's present throughout the JoJo series, which is that members of certain families are connected through invisible psychic links.
Yeah, the psychic link's a thing. Yeah.
This was
Oh, mate, just watch Hamon Beat's videos. Like, everything is connected.
directly stated by Avdol early in Part 3 as the explanation behind the awakening of the Joestar stands. This was later fleshed out with a similar link also existing between Enya and her son Jay Guile, as well as others in later parts of the series, which I'll leave out to avoid spoiling them, but for anyone who has read or watched Part 6 knows, there's definitely a lot of psychic links going on in there.
Oh, yeah.
The link between the Joestars and Jonathan's body is maybe the single most important piece of information for explaining the connection between the stands, because we actually have another example of exactly that kind of connection occurring. Everybody knows about Joseph's stand Hermit Purple,
Yep.
which takes the form of purple vines
So
that allow
cool.
him to manipulate technology to do spirit photography. But what many people often forget is that Jonathan's body awakened its own stand independent of the world, which takes the same form and has the same ability as Hermit Purple. As a quick aside, some JoJo fans erroneously believe that this stand was part of a scrapped plot point in Part 3, where Dio would actually possess every stand ability. However, this is simply not true. While many people have somehow claimed that Araki has spoken about this before, no known source actually points to this idea, and it only exists as a fan theory. It is also contradicted by official sources, with the JoJo A Go-Go databook directly referring to this as Jonathan's stand. This ability was shown a couple times throughout Part 3, with it first appearing before the Tower of Grey fight, where we see that Dio uses it to spy on the Crusaders so he can send enemies their way.
Right,
We
yeah.
later see it in a flashback of a meeting between Dio and Polnareff, where he uses it to create an image of
There
Jay
you go,
Guile
it's
on the
used
crystal
again,
ball.
damn.
And while it doesn't appear directly again, we can also assume that this ability is what allowed Dio to counter Joseph's spirit photography through the TV in the Yellow Temperance fight. So we see that just like Jotaro and Dio, Jonathan and Joseph also have the same stand ability. We actually have a couple more examples of this as well. Two of the minor
Wow.
antagonists of Part 3 were the Darby brothers, who both had stands that trap one's soul after losing a bet. So we can deduce
And
that
they're
due to
related.
their blood relation, the two developed a similar stand ability. And even later in Part 4, we
It does make sense, yeah. So, like, people that have similar bloodline or are in the same bloodline have similar abilities given to them.
see two rat stand users that also possess the same stand, likely due to them either being related or just being incredibly similar creatures. So I think it's made clear that the idea of the two having the same type of stand is not
It
a mere
makes sense,
coincidence.
yeah.
It is actually part of an established phenomenon in the series,
Class.
which was even demonstrated within Part 3 before the twist actually occurred. While there is a lot of misinformation as part of the arguments against the time stop making sense, there's actually another side to the issue, which is how some people's explanations on how it does make sense themselves contain misinformation. So for the sake of being thorough, I'd like to cover one of those as well. One of the
Right.
main justifications for the time stop you'll see online is that it was actually foreshadowed by Jotaro always being able to stop time, even before the final battle. One of the most common examples you'll hear is that in the fight with Darby, Jotaro stopped time to grab the drink from the bar. However, this is simply not what happened.
No.
Jotaro did not stop time until the final battle, and anything he did before that point was only a result of Star Platinum's extreme speed.
Very
Part of
fast,
the
yeah.
reason we
Yeah,
know
it's just
this is
really
because of
quick.
how we know a person comes to use time stop. Enya tells us that in order to move and stop time, you have to believe
You
you're
can do it.
capable of
Yeah,
doing
yeah.
it. Jotaro
Yeah, so Jotaro's just like, I know that my stand's gonna stop me dying, so that's what happens.
was able to discover this after learning about Dio's ability from Joseph, and was able to put two and two together to perceive and eventually move within the stops. But Jotaro didn't know about time stop beforehand, so there's no way he would have been able to move within it. Furthermore, if Jotaro had been stopping time all along, Dio would have surely noticed that and been
Definitely.
aware that there was at least one other person who could stop time out there. Regarding the connection between Jotaro and Dio, I've seen many people bring up that such a thing shouldn't exist, since while Jotaro is related to Jonathan, the same should not be true for Dio himself. I simply have to disagree here. After having possessed Jonathan's body for so long, Dio in every practical sense became Jonathan. We do see that Jonathan's body has some amount of separation from Dio, as it was said that the body rejecting Dio's head was the reason behind the weakening of Dio's vampiric abilities, but the two are undeniably connected as a single biological being. The most glaring example of this would be the fact that Dio actually has control of Jonathan's stand, a representation of Jonathan's own fighting spirit. So I think it's very clear that Dio would have some connection to Jonathan's descendants as well, with him being the one possessing Jonathan's body, especially after 100 years. Another point I see raised against the two having the same type of stand is people asking why Jotaro specifically is the one to have the ability, when it could have just as easily been any other Joestar. There's a few things to consider here. First of all, it's a well-known fact that stands reflect their user in some way. As a manifestation of their spirit, it usually acts like an extension of their already existing personality into an ability. If we take a look at Joseph, his character has the role of a supporter and a guide for the group, and fitting with that personality, his stand manifests as Hermit Purple, which is also compatible with his Hamon abilities. Taking that into account, I think it's obvious why Jotaro would have a stand like Star Platinum. He's a powerful fighter, and so his stand is a reflection of that. Obviously, Star Platinum wouldn't just appear in someone like Holly or Joseph, but I can see why the idea isn't completely satisfying to people, and they would want something more to grab onto. I think Jotaro's time stop starts to make a lot more sense both thematically and in-universe when we take into account Dio's ultimate goal. Dio is really a fascinating character, and I
Dio's
consider
fantastic.
him the greatest that Araki has ever written, especially when taking his whole story into account across multiple parts. However, I think he is also the single most misunderstood character in the series. As I've gone over in videos before, Dio's motivation is
if you've not watched him, like, he's done so many decent videos on Dio. Dio Fate in Heaven's great, and what was the other one? There's a whole video on Fate within JoJo as well, I think that he's done, that ties in really well with it. Hamon Beat does some really good videos.
Power, with some asserting that his philosophy was only laid out after the fact in later parts. I disagree, obviously, and I think that Dio's goal was not only clearly established, but that it plays a crucial role in understanding the story. Back in part 1, Dio became obsessed with his connection to Jonathan. As a result of his upbringing, Dio developed a sort of superiority complex, viewing others as disposable means of raising himself up. But with Jonathan, he found someone whose fate was completely intertwined with his. In Dio's own words, if it weren't for Jonathan, he wouldn't have gained the stone mask, but because of Jonathan, he can't conquer the world. Dio's conclusion is that since the two of them make one, he will take Jonathan's body, becoming him both physically and metaphysically in the eyes of fate. Like I said before, Dio did accomplish this, with him and Jonathan becoming essentially one being. Another one of Dio's defining traits from this point is his obsession with fate. Why are people fated to meet? What is it that connects people, and what kind of force of gravity compels them together? Well, we know what the connections between people are since we discussed them already in the video. Certain people are connected via powerful psychic links, but beyond that, it seems like all people are connected in some form through the power of fate, or a gravity between people that brings them together.
Gravity being
we
the
see
same
this
thing
laid
as
out
fate
pretty
within the
clearly
world
in
of
the
JoJo's,
series,
yeah.
with things like the statement that stand users are drawn together. Fate itself
Part
causes them
4.
to meet. I think it's
Diamond is Unbreakable really pushes on that whole like stand users being drawn to each other.
through this that we start to understand the real thematic meaning behind Jotaro having the same ability as Dio.
Powerful.
After gaining a stand ability that Dio views as invincible, he sees defeating the Joestars as his final challenge to fully claiming Jonathan's body and having dominion over fate itself. But just like with Jonathan, his one path to victory is also his main obstacle. It's because of Jonathan's body that he's able to obtain his stand, but it's also because of the body that stands awakened in Jonathan's descendants.
And then
Dio
they're
is
there to
fascinated in the
fight him.
connections between people and uses that to gather allies to spread his influence. But that same connection is the method the Crusaders use to track him down. And while Dio's ability to stop time is his ticket to ruling the world, the fact that he awakened such an ability caused an identical one to awaken in Jotaro. With Jotaro being the one that has fated the clash with Dio, I think it's pretty obvious why Fate would choose him as the one to mirror Dio's ability. Fate in JoJo often acts like a balancing force. When one character takes advantage of fate or alters it to meet their ends, there's often a kind of rubber band effect where their hubris gets the better of them and fate self-corrects.
Oh yeah, definitely.
In this case, the one who has the same stand ability as Dio is
Oh no, it's always cool when you see the villain thinking that they've got it, and then all they're like being cocky, and then also it's like, wait a minute, what? No, it's it's so good to see.
The one who is fated to clash with him, making it evenly matched. That's about everything I've got to cover today. Overall, I enjoyed the implementation of Jotaro's time stop in Part 3, and I think it acts as a really interesting part of Dio's long character arc, and I find it to be an opportunity to talk about the really fascinating supernatural phenomena that happens in the background of the series. It was fun to be able to hone in on one topic to go over, so let me know in the
very
comments
cool.
what other topics or questions
Check
you'd
them
like to
out.
see
Hamon
me
Beat.
cover in a
Check them
standalone
out.
video.
Very cool. Very awesome. I would love to see Hamon Beat do, not like too regular, but every now and then pick up on like a random thing and then talk about it, because I just love JoJo's related stuff. It's awesome, and I think Hamon Beat does a really good way of like portraying and explaining it, putting in a video. So that was awesome, and yeah, thanks for watching.